Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, The Green Bard. This is episode 6-8 of the Direwolves of Winterfell, White Wolf, Black Weapons, covering Ghost's peculiar behavior as the Watch approached the Fist of the First Men, leading to his finding of the dragonglass daggers, arrowheads, and spear points, plus what some believe to be the Horn of Winter. A Clash of Kings, Jon 4. As they reach the Fist of the First Men, Ghost does not want to ascend. As the men ascended, Jon has to call Ghost twice to bring him up, but the wolf continually runs off until Mormont tells Jon to let him be. At first, it might seem that he just wanted to hunt, but when Jon returns to get him, he has to drag him bodily, which still doesn't work. Still, he obediently comes at Jon's call. He just won't ascend the hill. Not understanding, Jon eventually relents, assuming he'll go hunt. The contradiction in Ghost's reluctance to accompany Jon is even more stark, pun intended, when you consider that Jon is very disquieted at the eeriness of the woods surrounding the Fist, concerned for Ghost. Ghost should sense Jon's concern and be at his side for protection. The fact that he isn't indicates either that he doesn't sense any danger, that he senses something and wants to track it, or that there is a third party meddling in Ghost's actions, keeping him away from Jon. Recall prior instances of Ghost's disobedience, such as Jon's failed attempt at desertion. These often accompany significant plot points involving the behavior of the direwolf. It is no different here, as we'll get to. There are 4 other notable events in the passage. 1. Ghost sniffs the ring fort and then retreats. This might indicate he did not want to enter because of something about the place, but later he enters on his own, which doesn't compute. 2. Jon angrily says, "What's wrong with you?" He gets no answer, of course. This type of exclamation, "What's wrong with me," etc., is a type of signpost to me to pay attention for some significant plot point. It definitely tingles my spidey sense. The third peculiar thing is Ghost's eyes, mentioned as red, but not burning, giving us no evidence of Ghost's mood. We might get an explanation for this later in the chapter. Lastly, Jon worries that anything could be out there in the forest. At a minimum, this is an indication that Jon is afraid, as I just mentioned. This could also have a tinfoil explanation, that there was someone specifically watching in the woods. We'll cover that more later. He rode to the top with Lord Mormont and the officers, leaving Ghost below under the trees. The direwolf had run off 3 times as they climbed, twice returning reluctantly to Jon's whistle. The third time, the Lord Commander lost patience and snapped, "Let him go, boy. I want to reach the crest before dusk. Find the wolf later." Later that chapter. Once he'd put up the Lord Commander's tent and seen to the horses, Jon descended the hill in search of Ghost. The direwolf came at once, all in silence. One moment Jon was striding beneath the trees, whistling and shouting, alone in the green, pine cones and fallen leaves under his feet. The next, the great white direwolf was walking beside him, pale as morning mist. That passage, the pale as morning mist part, just evokes something magical happening. It's almost cinematic the way the author describes it, just like a magical mist you'd see in a Hollywood fantasy. Sadly, the HBO adaptation left that bit out, as with so many other direwolf scenes. But that's part of the reason I'm here, to bring those direwolf scenes to life for you. But when they reached the ring fort, Ghost balked again. He padded forward warily to sniff at the gap in the stones, and then retreated, as if he did not like what he smelled. Jon tried to grab him by the scruff of his neck and haul him bodily inside the ring. No easy task. The wolf weighed as much as he did, and was stronger by far. "Ghost, what's wrong with you?" It was not like him to be so unsettled. In the end, Jon had to give up. "As you will," he told the wolf. "Go hunt." The red eyes watched him as he made his way back through the mossy stones. Later that chapter. Ghost was not like to be alone down there, he thought. Anything could be moving under that sea, creeping toward the ring fort, through the dark of the wood, concealed beneath the trees. Anything. Of course, by that he means the others. How would they ever know? He stood there for a long time, until the sun vanished behind the saw-toothed mountains, and darkness began to creep through the forest. Later, Ghost joins Jon at the fire, which may mean he had no real problem with the ring fort itself, despite the sniffing scene earlier. Upon his return, it starts to become apparent that he wanted Jon to follow him. It's possible that he wanted him to follow all along, but it's only evident to Jon now, and by proxy to us readers, when Jon realizes that it did not seem as if he were after meat. Either way, he is still afraid and alarmed, but eventually follows Ghost. Note also how Jon connects Ghost's weird behavior to another time we've postulated that Ghost was messed with telepathically, when they saved Mormont. Admittedly, Jon's confusion is a weakness in my idea that Ghost can broadcast thoughts or feelings. We readers don't get Ghost's emotions. We only see his actions. There are a few possible explanations for this issue here. It's possible that I'm reading too much into this. And it's also possible that the author wanted to keep Ghost's abilities a bit more mysterious, so he did not use them in this instance. Sharing an image of what Ghost had found would have made it crystal clear to Jon, but that it doesn't happen here doesn't necessarily mean that Ghost is not special. Or perhaps the lack of any evidence of the emotional bond is also an indication that Ghost currently is under someone else's control, cut off from Jon telepathically. This idea may explain the lack of burning in Ghost's eyes earlier. For what it's worth, I also think that George, who has written for the screen, benefited from that experience in writing this scene. The way that Ghost races ahead and then waits for Jon would have transferred exceedingly well to the HBO show. Sadly, of course, some idiot decided to have Sam find the dragonglass, depriving us of this awesome scene. Nonetheless, a lot happens as Ghost leads Jon away from the hilltop. First, Ghost startles one of the horses along the way. I can't help but think of the horsemanship of Jon's aunt and uncle, Lyanna and Brandon, in this scene. It seems likely to me that both of them had some ability to skin change their horses, making them half a horse, or a pair of centaurs. It seems Jon, known to be a warg, inherited that same gene, if this ability turns out to be genetic, that is. His ability to quickly calm the horse with almost no effort is a great indication of this. Jon is powerful. There is also a contradiction in how Ghost races down the hill while Jon proceeds deliberately and carefully. One would expect that their approach is mirrored, with both racing down or proceeding carefully, as in several stressful situations with Bran and Summer. The only thing I can assume here is that Ghost is not strongly linked to Jon through the bond at this particular moment, nor most of this day, which is one more indication that someone else could be meddling or mingling with Ghost's mind. If you still think this isn't possible, check in later for our discussion of Melisandre's interactions with Ghost, for a rebuttal. "Ghost," Jon breathed, surprised. "So you came inside after all, eh?" The White Wolf often hunted at night. He had not expected to see him again till daybreak. "Was the hunting so bad?" he asked. "Here, to me, Ghost." The Direwolf circled the fire, sniffing Jon, sniffing the wind, never still. It did not seem as if he were after meat right now. "When the dead came walking, Ghost knew. He woke me, warned me." Alarmed, he got to his feet. "Is something out there? Ghost, do you have a scent?" Tywin said he smelled cold. The Direwolf loped off, stopped, looked back. "He wants me to follow." Pulling up the hood of his cloak, Jon walked away from the tents, away from the warmth of his fire, past the lines of shaggy little garrons. One of the horses whickered nervously when Ghost padded by. Jon soothed him with a word and paused to stroke his muzzle. He could hear the wind whistling through the cracks in the rocks as they neared the ring wall. A voice called out a challenge. Jon stepped into the torchlight. "I need to fetch water for the Lord Commander." Jon slipped sideways between two sharpened stakes while Ghost slid beneath them. A torch had been thrust down into a crevice, its flames flying pale orange banners when the gusts came. He snatched it up as he squeezed through the gap between the stones. Ghost went racing down the hill. Jon followed more slowly, the torch thrust out before him as he made his descent. The camp sounds faded behind him. The night was black, the slope steep, stony, and uneven. A moment's inattention would be a sure way to break an ankle, or his neck. "What am I doing?" he asked himself as he picked his way down. I want to give a shout out to u/Mumamahesh on Reddit, who has a terrific analysis of this scene discussing how whomever planted the dragonglass, they suggest cold hands, used some techniques that confuse Ghost's tracking skills in the scene, including using streams to hide the scent, as Summer and Shaggy did when Theon was tracking them later in this same volume. Also in the next passage, as Jon struggles to follow Ghost, There is a line that several theorists believe may be related to the Children of the Forest. It is where Jon glimpsed a flash of green. While this is certainly conjecture, it may be that instead of glimpsing leaves in the torchlight, the conventional understanding of the passage, of course, he instead actually glimpsed a child of the forest. The reason I don't discard the idea is the use of the term flash. While George R. R. Martin may have only used the term because of the torchlight and the flicker of flame, causing a reflected flash, he may also have intended it as a clue of the children of the forest watching, being seen, and then fleeing. They may have even been the same person who delivered the dragonglass. Note that George uses flash of white to describe motion by Ghost not long after. The trees stood beneath him, warriors armored in bark and leaf, deployed in their silent ranks, awaiting the command to storm the hill. Black, they seemed. It was only when his torchlight brushed against them that Jon glimpsed a flash of green. Faintly he heard the sound of water flowing over rocks. Ghost vanished in the underbrush. Jon struggled after him, listening to the call of the brook, to leaves sighing in the wind. Branches clutched at his cloak, while overhead thick limbs twined together and shut out the stars. Ghost's continued lack of obedience throughout the entire episode is, I think, the best evidence that he is being influenced or controlled by someone else. In the next passage, Ghost makes no moves to go to Jon when called. It even makes Jon angry, but he follows. Again, there is a lack of Ghost mirroring Jon's anger. His eyes are not burning. Instead, his eyes are described as baleful. This is actually our best evidence for third-party meddling with Ghost. Baleful means full of menacing and maligned influence. Thanks, Alexa. And wow. I'm glad I noticed that word when making my edits. Let's just pause to take that in. So, I interpret this to mean that a menacing and maligned influence may be on Ghost in this scene. Bloodraven played it all. As an aside, notice that the eyes glowed like the moon instead of burning like the sun. LML have a field day with that symbolism. So Ghost is also described here as lean. This is the first and only time he is described that way. Summer, Greywind, and Shaggydog are described this way several times, but Ghost instead had only been described as the largest of the pack. This could be an indication that unsuccessful hunting is taking its toll. He found Ghost lapping from the stream. "Ghost," he called. "To me! Now!" When the direwolf raised his head, his eyes glowed red and baleful, and water streamed down from his jaws like slaver. There was something fierce and terrible about him in that instant. And then he was off, bounding past Jon, racing through the trees. "Ghost, no, stay!" He shouted, but the wolf paid no heed. The lean and white shape was swallowed by the dark, and Jon had only two choices: to climb the hill again, alone, or to follow. He followed, angry, holding the torch out low so he could see the rocks that threatened to trip him with every step, the thick roots that seemed to grab at his feet, the holes where a man could twist an ankle. Every few feet he called again for Ghost, but the night wind was swirling amongst the trees, and it drank the words. This is madness, he thought, as he plunged deeper into the trees. He was about to turn back when he glimpsed a flash of white off ahead and to the right, back toward the hill. He jogged after it, cursing under his breath. A quarter way around the fist, he chased the wolf before he lost him again. Finally, he stopped to catch his breath amidst the scrub, thorns, and tumbled rocks at the base of the hill. Beyond the torchlight, the dark pressed close. When Jon finally catches the wolf again, he is digging up the bundle of dragonglass, hidden behind a tree, perhaps purposely so that only Jon/Ghost would find it. Jon thinks it will be a body, connecting Ghost's weird behavior to another time when his mind may have been meddled with, when he found the whites. Also beyond the wall, mind you. As an aside, while I have no evidence for this, it is perhaps easier for Bloodraven to meddle with Ghosts while they are on the same side of the wall. By direct telepathy, I mean. Ghost's next and last move in the scene is to sit on his haunches, watching. Again, this language fits perfectly if Bloodraven is using Ghost's mind, this time to see Jon collect the prize. A prize he had someone deliberately put there not long ago. Jon actually considers the idea that has been there for a long time, but the condition of the Night's Watch cloak makes it obvious that this was placed there recently. A soft scrabbling noise made him turn. Jon moved toward the sound, stepping carefully among boulders and thorn bushes. Behind a fallen tree, he came on Ghost again. The direwolf was digging furiously, kicking up dirt. "What have you found?" Jon lowered the torch, revealing a rounded mound of soft earth. A grave, he thought. But whose? He knelt, jammed the torch into the ground beside him. The soil was loose, sandy. Jon pulled it out by the fistful. There were no stones, no roots. Whatever was here had been put here recently. 2 feet down, his fingers touched cloth. He had been expecting a corpse, fearing a corpse, but this was something else. He pushed against the fabric and felt small, hard shapes beneath, unyielding. There was no smell, no sign of grave worms. Ghost backed off and sat on his haunches, watching. Jon brushed the loose soil away to reveal a rounded bundle, perhaps 2 feet across. He jammed his fingers down around the edges and worked it loose. When he pulled it free, whatever was inside shifted and clinked. Treasure, he thought. But the shapes were wrong to be coins, and the sound was wrong for metal. A length of frayed rope bound the bundle together. Jon unsheathed his dagger and cut it, groped for the edge of the cloth, and pulled. The bundle turned, and its contents spilled out onto the ground, glittering dark and bright. He saw a dozen knives, leaf-shaped spearheads, numerous arrowheads. Jon picked up a dagger blade, feather-light and shiny black, hiltless. Torchlight ran along its edge, a thin orange line that spoke of razor sharpness. Dragonglass, what the maesters call obsidian. Had Ghost uncovered some ancient cache of the children of the forest, buried here for thousands of years? The Fist of the First Men was an old place, only beneath the dragonglass was an old war horn, made from an aurochs horn and banded in bronze. Jon shook the dirt from inside it, and a stream of arrowheads fell out. He let them fall, pulled up a corner of the cloth the weapons had been wrapped in, rubbing it between his fingers. Good wool, thick, a double weave, damp but not rotted. It could not have been long in the ground, and it was dark. He seized a handful and pulled it close to the torch. Not dark, black. Now, it's worth pointing out that the behavior of Ghost may be explained, partially, by him picking up a scent that led him to the dragonglass. To me, one scent that might cause this would be if the cloak had belonged to Benjen Stark, and that may very well be the case. Of course, this doesn't explain Ghost's disobedience, only his will to hunt, and how he led Jon to the place. It also doesn't explain the lack of mirroring, and the repeated connections Jon makes in his mind to other unexplainable weird actions by Ghost. And perhaps most importantly, it also doesn't explain the use of the term baleful to describe Ghost's eyes. One final aside, I can't help but mention the old war horn that Jon finds. I believe, as many do, that this is the real Horn of Joramun. I wonder if Sam, who took it to the Citadel, can fix the chip on the mouthpiece. What might it be used for if he does? A Clash of Kings, Jon 5. The next mention of Ghost is by Qhorin Halfhand. It is only a passing mention, but later in the same chapter, Qhorin chooses Jon to go on his ranging party, leaving the Fist. His given reason for selecting Jon is that the old gods are still strong beyond the wall, the gods of the First Men and the Starks. To me, coupled with his reaction to Jon's wolf dream a few chapters later, this is a pretty clear indication that Qhorin suspected Jon was a warg, and included him in the party partially for this reason. Jon's only response is to say Ghost is hunting. I do wonder how much actual hunting Ghost has been doing at the Fist. But Jon's mention at least serves to remind us of the theme of the call of the hunt. He was a friend to the Watch. Qhorin glanced behind him. It is said that a direwolf runs with you. Ghost should be back by dawn. He hunts at night. Later that chapter. Tullet can care for you as well, my lord. Qhorin lifted his maimed 2-fingered hand. The old gods are still strong beyond the wall, the gods of the First Men and the Starks. A Clash of Kings, Jon 6. Speaking of recognition of wargs, the next mention of Ghost is when he is reunited with Jon after Jon and Stone Snake kill the Wildling Watchers and capture Ygritte. When the rest of the party rejoin them, Ghost runs ahead and they play a little game of tug-of-war with Jon's wrist. It is a nice moment of affection and display of their bond. strong again after the seeming lack of bond at the fist. What's more, Ygritte watches wide-eyed. Recall that she just lost her friend Orell, a skin changer in his own right. I'd say that she almost certainly recognizes Jon as a Warg in this moment. Later, Qhorin leaves Jon with instructions to deal with Ygritte, mentioning that he's the blood of Winterfell. Given that Ygritte just finished telling him the story of Bal the Bard, it is likely that this reminder left Jon conflicted and played into his decision to release her unharmed. One must wonder, when Qhorin learned from Stone Snake that she had told Jon the story, did Qhorin want her released? They certainly didn't torture her, so they bore her no ill will. The lack of pumping her for information also makes me question the whole premise of the mission. Does Qhorin already know where the wildlings are? Does he even believe in his own mission as a fact-finder? Or is he already angling for Jon to be implanted with the wildlings as a spy? One other implication of Ygritte recognizing Jon as a Warg is that she doesn't try to run from him. Likely she'd know that with Ghost there, it'd be futile, unless her goal was to get her throat ripped out.
No, Ygritte said, but a bard's truth is different than yours or mine. Anyway, you asked for the story, so I told it. She turned away from him, closed her eyes, and seemed to sleep. Dawn and Qhorin Halfhand arrived together. The black stones had turned to gray, and the eastern sky had gone indigo when Stone Snake spied the rangers below, wending their way upward. Jon woke his captive and held her by the arm as they descended to meet them. Thankfully, there was another way off the mountain to the north and west, along paths much gentler than the one that had brought them up here. They were waiting in a narrow defile when the brothers appeared, leading their garrons. Ghost raced ahead at first scent of them. Jon squatted to let the direwolf close his jaw around his wrist, tugging his hand back and forth. It was a game they played. But when he glanced up, he saw Ygritte watching with eyes wide and white as hen's eggs.
Later that chapter.
Then you must do what needs be done, Qhorin Halfhand said. You are the blood of Winterfell and a man of the Night's Watch. He looked at the others. Come, brothers, leave him to it. It will go easier for him if we do not watch. And he led them up the steep, twisting trail toward the pink glow of the sun where it broke through a mountain cleft. And before very long, only Jon and Ghost remained with the wildling girl. He thought Ygritte might try to run, but she only stood there, waiting, looking at him. You never killed a woman before, did ya? When he shook his head, she said, We die the same as men, but you don't need to do it. Mance would take you, I know he would. There's secret ways, them crows would never catch us.
And with that, we'll leave you. The next episode will be packed with a wolf dream and all sorts of action in the Frost Banks. See you then.
So high the wall above my eyes, but once I watched.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video.
Songs of love, her bell I'd ring in the window, but lies should sing. It's so lonely.
Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far.
It's so lonely neath the shade of the wall.
If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.